Have you ever been forced to choose between fear and faith when neither felt safe? Between staying invisible to survive or stepping into danger just to breathe again? Tonight's story isn't about luck. It's about a woman with no good options who made one desperate choice, and how that choice changed everything. If you believe love can find you even in your darkest hour, stay with me. And before we begin, tap like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if the only way to feel safe was to trust a stranger? Late one Friday night in Los Angeles, Mira Collins grabbed a stranger's arm outside a Korean restaurant, and in that single reckless moment, she rewrote her life. People would later ask Mira why she did it. Why she touched a man she'd never seen before? Why she trusted someone dressed too well to be standing on a cracked sidewalk at midnight? The answer was painfully simple. She had run out of safe choices. It was 11:47 p.m. The air was cool, sharp enough to sting her lungs. 6 blocks from home, her ex-husband Evan waited under a broken streetlight, pretending to scroll his phone while watching her reflection in the dark storefront windows. He always did that now. Stayed just legal enough to be untouchable. Close enough to remind her he could. The restraining order had been denied again. Insufficient evidence. No explicit threats. Only bruises. Just fear. Mira had worked a 12-hour shift at County Memorial Hospital. Stayed late because a nurse called out, missed her usual bus, and now had to walk farther than usual. Her feet ached. Her head throbbed. Her patience, long abused, was gone. She stepped off the bus and saw him. Evan. Waiting. Something inside her cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Because she'd been strong for 3 years straight, and tonight she couldn't be. Her heels clicked faster against the pavement. Keys slid between her fingers like her mother had taught her. Thumb hovered over the panic button on her phone even though she knew it wouldn't matter. Following wasn't illegal. Terror wasn't actionable. She heard him behind her. His footsteps were deliberate now. Mira. Too loud. Too close. Stop. We need to talk. She didn't stop. I said, stop. Anger sharpened his voice. Don't walk away from me. I'm talking about our daughter. Using 4-year-old Lily's name like a weapon. Like he'd earned that right. Her vision blurred. Panic and exhaustion tangled until she couldn't tell which was winning. Then she saw him. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in a black suit that didn't belong to this street. Standing outside Lotus Bloom, the Korean restaurant that somehow stayed busy even at midnight. He wasn't leaning or slouching. He stood alert. Still. Like someone trained to notice danger before it arrived. Mira didn't think. She crossed the street and reached for him. Her fingers trembled against expensive fabric. Real. Solid. Please, she whispered, voice breaking. Please walk with me. He's been following me and I'm scared. For one awful second, she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Then his hand closed around hers. Warm. Steady. Certain. Just breathe, he said quietly, a soft Korean accent smoothing the words. I've got you. His dark eyes lifted past her shoulder, locking onto Evan, who froze a few feet away. The stranger's assessment took seconds. A terrified woman. An aggressive man. No complexity. He stepped between them without raising his voice, without threatening, without hesitation. She's not your wife, he said calmly when Evan puffed up and tried to assert himself. And you're leaving. Evan sneered, tried to recover. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know enough, the stranger replied. He took one slow step forward. And if I see you near her again, you won't be dealing with police. You'll be dealing with me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was certain. Evan backed away. Mira's knees nearly gave out when he finally disappeared into the parking lot. "Come on," the stranger said gently. "Let me walk you home." They walked in silence. 3 blocks. He matched her pace exactly. Didn't ask questions. Didn't push. Just existed beside her like an anchor in a storm. At her mother's gate, he handed her a cream-colored business card. One name. One number. Daniel Seo, it read. Import-export consultant. "If he comes near you again," Daniel said, "call me, anytime." "Why would you help me?" Mira asked, voice shaking. "Because you chose to fight instead of freeze," he said softly. "That takes courage." Then he walked away. And for the first time in 3 years, Mira felt something she didn't recognize. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying hope. That night, she barely slept. 3 hours, maybe. Broken by checking locks and listening for engines. At 6 a.m., Lily crawled into her bed asking for pancakes. Chocolate chip. Mira smiled through burning eyes. On the nightstand, Daniel's card caught the morning light. By noon, she texted him. By nightfall, he was waiting outside the restaurant again. And by the end of that week, Mira realized something that terrified her more than Evan ever had. Some strangers don't disappear. Some stay. And some bring consequences you never see coming. 2 weeks passed, and Mira stopped pretending Daniel's presence was temporary. He walked her home every night. She worked late. Same 3 blocks. Same quiet pace. Sometimes they talked about nothing. Traffic, hospital food, Lily's obsession with dinosaurs. Sometimes they walked in silence that felt earned, not awkward. Daniel never pushed. Never crossed a boundary she didn't open herself. That restraint scared her more than aggression ever had. She learned small things about him. He drank his coffee black. Remembered details without announcing it. Knew when to change the subject and when to sit with discomfort. He grew up in Los Angeles, but his parents had immigrated from Seoul. His sister had died young. He didn't explain how. Mira didn't ask. Because people who survived learned when silence was a gift. One Friday night, exactly 2 weeks after she'd grabbed his arm, Daniel hesitated outside Lotus Bloom. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" he asked carefully. A real one. Her first instinct was fear. Dating meant exposure. Exposure meant Evan. "I have a daughter," she said quickly. "I know," Daniel replied. "She's welcome. Or your mother. Or, we sit by a window where everyone can see us, whatever you need." That was what made her say yes. Saturday evening, Daniel met them outside the restaurant. He knelt to Lily's level, spoke to her like she mattered, listened when she explained her stuffed elephant's entire personality. Lily decided she liked him immediately, which terrified Mira more than anything else. Children didn't pretend. Dinner was warm, ordinary, unsettlingly normal. Daniel let Lily steal food from his plate. Taught her how to say delicious in Korean. Mira watched him with her child and felt something dangerous forming in her chest. Hope again. After Lily fell asleep against her grandmother's shoulder, Mira finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. "What do you really do?" Daniel didn't dodge it. "My father built power the wrong way," he said quietly. "I inherited the consequences." He told her enough to be honest without being dramatic. There had been arrests. Dismissed charges. Associations with men who went to prison. 5 years ago, he'd dismantled everything illegal, rebuilt his businesses clean, paid his taxes, severed ties. "I'm not proud of who I was," he said. "But I am accountable." Mira should have run. Instead, she told him about Evan. About the stalking that never crossed legal lines. About the restraining order denied. About living in constant vigilance. Sometimes, she admitted, voice barely audible, I forget what it feels like not to be afraid. Daniel didn't touch her. Didn't promise anything dramatic. You shouldn't have to live like that, he said. And then he did something far more dangerous than grand gestures. He showed up. When Mira mentioned her overworked court-appointed lawyer, Daniel quietly connected her with a top-tier family attorney. When her mother's arthritis flared, Daniel researched clinical trials and made calls without being asked. When a broken porch railing threatened her mother's balance, Daniel arrived with tools and fixed it himself. He never said, I did this for you. He just did it. Sunday dinners became routine. Lily trusted him. Her mother noticed. Mira pretended she didn't. Across the city, Evan noticed too. He saw the photos. A man walking Mira home. A stranger sitting where he believed he still belonged. Rage crystallized into purpose. He hired a private investigator. 3 weeks later, Evan held a folder thick with Daniel's past. Old arrest records. Business connections. News articles about organized crime in Koreatown. Everything dismissed, resolved, ended, but documented. Evan didn't see reform. He saw leverage. The custody motion arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Mira opened it at her kitchen table while Lily colored in the living room. Emergency custody modification. Exposure to dangerous individual. Poor judgment. Risk to minor child. Attached were photos of her smiling. Walking. Living. Weaponized. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't finish reading. They're trying to take Lily, she whispered to her mother. That night, she went to Daniel's office. Glass, steel. Power she didn't belong in. Daniel read the papers silently. His jaw tightened. Then he did the one thing she hadn't expected. I'll step back, he said. Her heart dropped. I won't give him ammunition, Daniel continued. I won't be the reason you lose your daughter. Tears burned her eyes. That's not fair. Fair doesn't matter, he said. Lily does. That was when Mira understood how deeply he loved her. And how much it would cost. She took a breath and made the hardest decision of her life. No. Daniel looked up, startled. I'm not letting my ex-husband terrorize me into erasing my life, she said. I'm not choosing fear anymore. I'm fighting. She met his eyes, steady now. But I need to know. Are you willing to have your past dragged into open court? Daniel didn't hesitate. I've been judged my whole life, he said quietly. If proving who I am now protects your child, I'll stand there and take it. The custody battle that followed was brutal. Home inspections. Psychological evaluations. CPS interviews. Lawyers dissecting her choices. Judges weighing perceived risk over lived reality. Evan painted himself as a concerned father. Mira told the truth. Daniel testified without excuses. He admitted who he'd been and showed who he was. When the judge finally took the case under advisement, Mira felt hollowed out. 7 days of waiting stretched like a lifetime. She barely slept, barely ate. Lily sensed it and clung closer. Daniel kept his distance publicly. Texted privately. Just breathe. On the 7th day, Mira opened the ruling on her phone in the hospital parking lot. Full custody granted. Supervised visitation only. Permanent restraining order. She collapsed into tears. That night, Daniel held her like she was made of glass. You're safe, he whispered, but part 2 wasn't the end. Because safety doesn't erase scars. And love, once chosen, demands permanence. 6 months passed, and life didn't magically become easy. It became possible. Mira still worked long nights at County Memorial, but she no longer walked home with fear tightening her chest. Daniel was there when she needed him, And when she didn't, he trusted her strength enough to step back. That balanced protection without control was something she'd never known existed. Her mother moved into a small guest cottage behind Daniel's house in Pasadena. The arthritis treatment worked better than anyone expected. She gardened again, laughed more, started hosting book club on Sundays, like the woman she'd been before. Pain made her smaller. Lily thrived. No more nightmares. No more asking why her father didn't come. Children adapted when safety became routine. Ballet classes on Saturdays. Pink tutus. A bedroom painted seafoam green with glow-in-the-dark stars. Daniel never tried to replace Evan. He simply showed up consistently, the way children understood best. Evan faded into the background of supervised visits and court portals. Therapy appointments he sometimes skipped. Anger dulled by consequences. Not redeemed, but no longer dangerous. Daniel's businesses continued their quiet transformation. Fully legitimate. Transparent. He funded domestic violence shelters without press releases. Employed people who needed second chances without announcing it. The past stopped chasing him when he stopped running from it. One Sunday afternoon, they went to Griffith Park. It wasn't a special occasion. That was the point. A picnic blanket. Lemonade. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Lily ran ahead, collecting dandelions and insisting they were rare flowers. Mira watched Daniel pretend to struggle with a kite that Lily had definitely tangled on purpose. Golden hour settled over the city. Daniel grew quiet. "Mira," he said softly. She turned, already knowing. 3 years ago, he'd been standing outside a restaurant at midnight, successful by every measurable standard, and completely empty. And then a terrified woman had grabbed his hand and said please. He knelt. The ring wasn't extravagant. Simple, honest. Exactly her. "You didn't save me," he said. "You reminded me who I wanted to be. You taught me that protection is presence, not power. That love doesn't erase the past, it redeems the future." Lily ran over, eyes wide. "Is this the part where you ask?" Mira laughed through tears. "Yes," she said before he could finish. 1,000 times yes. They didn't rush the wedding. Healing deserved patience. When they married, it wasn't lavish. A garden ceremony. Her mother cried openly. Lily threw petals with chaotic enthusiasm. Daniel wore a simple suit. Mira wore a dress that made her feel like herself again. No one spoke about midnight bus stops or custody battles. They didn't need to. Years later, Mira would wake on quiet mornings with coffee already brewing and sunlight spilling across a life she once thought was impossible. Lily would read chapter books on the couch. Her mother would paint in the garden. Daniel would kiss her temple and ask what she needed that day. Sometimes, Mira would think about that night. About fear being information, not destiny. About how asking for help wasn't weakness. And about how the right person never makes you feel small for needing safety. Somewhere in the city, another woman might be stepping off a late bus. Terrified, followed. Out of options. If Mira could speak to her, she'd say this: "You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to trust again. And sometimes, the stranger who walks you home becomes the family that saves you." If this story moved you, don't scroll away. Share it with someone who needs hope. Like, subscribe, and stay with Love and Loyalties for more stories about courage, second chances, and the kind of love that refuses to give up.